All right, good morning, computer science class. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be with you this morning. I'm not feeling very well. Wasn't really yesterday either, so I'm going to try and take a day and start feeling better. Today I want you to look at lesson number 4, conditional statements part 2. This is where we throw in the else part of the if statement. This is how we looked at it in Scratch. Many of you have this, I know, in your project, so it shouldn't be too much of a challenge for you. I'm also going to discuss quickly random numbers for you as well this morning. Sometimes we need to do something if something is not true, other words false, and this is the else part of an if statement. And here's an example, kind of a useless program. Suppose you want to input two numbers and determine which one is bigger. Pretty useless really, but just as a quick example. Here's what the sample run would look like. Enter number 1, that would be an input, 56. Enter number 2, 72, that's another input. And then the program has to determine which one of those two numbers is the bigger one. Obviously 72 is the bigger one. Here's the pseudocode for that program. Get the first number, again using an input. Get the second number using an input. Determine which is the bigger number, and then displaying that result. Okay, so let's go ahead and try and code that. The general syntax for an if statement is like this. I showed you this yesterday. It's if something, 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 then make sure the then is on the same line as the if. And you're going to do something because the if was true. Notice that that's indented here. Else, and then that's do something different because the if was false. So the then part is the true, and the else part is the false. Both of them must be indented properly. And you'll notice how the end if lines up with the else and the if, just like it did in Scratch, just like this. Okay, so here's that code. Input number 1, I didn't put any quotation marks here or anything. I just put an input just for an example. Input number 2, if number 1 is greater than number 2, then, again remember that the if and the then should appear on the same line. It looks like I'm missing a space in here. There should probably be a space between around the greater than sign. You guys will have to fix that up. So if number 1 is bigger than number 2, then print number 1 is bigger, else print number 2 is bigger, because either number 1 is going to be bigger or number 2 is going to be bigger. One of those two things is going to be true. This semicolon right here is something new. What it does is when you print the value of number 1 and you hang on to put the semicolon there, what it does is it continues the print on the same line. If you want to take that semicolon out, if you put a comma in there, it's going to tab it over. If you didn't have it, I think it would give you a syntax error. So the semicolon just sort of ties things together on prints. I think you'll figure that out as we move along. I'll give you a minute or so to type that in. Sub can press pause right here. All right, so hopefully you've finished typing that in, had it to run, maybe solved any syntax problems, had a chance to look at what if, then, else sort of looks like. If we look back at the tax question from the previous lesson, we assumed that the PST tax was 0 if it was not needed. We had something like if PST equals 1, then PST tax is amount times 0.07. This may not always be the case. This is only a true statement. Maybe should have done this just for clarity. We maybe should have had PST equals 1, then PST tax equals amount times 0.07. Else the PST tax is 0. It's a little more clear. It's a little more makes a little bit more sense. It covers both possibilities, and also it will work if you need to run the program more than once. You would need to do a reset. So it's a good habit to get into to do both the true and the false, and to use the if part of the if then else. Okay, so here's a practice assignment I want you to try on your own. A program is to be created that allows the user to guess a number. If they get it right, they win, and if they get it wrong, they lose. And there's only one chance. It's kind of a lame kind of game. We're going to work on this, and we'll show you how to do loops in Liberty Basic in a bit. So that's the general idea there. You will need the random number generator. You will need to know how this code works. This is something you will need to know. To get a random number between 1 and 10, this is the command. And it's random number, and this is just a variable. It can be any variable name you want. Random number equals int of rnd of 1 times 10 plus 1. And I know it's very confusing. Scratch does a real nice job of just giving you, pick a random number between 1 and 10. Unfortunately, Liberty Basic is not quite as good as that. If you want a random number between 1 and 100, this is the command. Random number equals int of RND of 1 times 100 plus 1. And so the key idea is the numbers that you're going between, this is the start, the plus 1, and the end. If you want a number between 1 and 10, you put it times by 10. If you want a number between 1 and 100, you put times 100 in there. Those are the two numbers you need to work with, okay? I'm going to leave it up to you to look up what int does. You can look it up in the help file. You are responsible for learning it. I'm going to expect that you know it. Just going to pause here for a second and let you jot down if you want, or type in random number equals int bracket RND bracket 1 bracket times 10 bracket plus 1. Okay, so here's the sample runs of our little guessing game. Guess a number. I guessed 4. No, too bad. The correct number was 7. That's the else, the false part. Here's another sample run. Guess a number 3. Yes, you're right. That's the true part. Okay, so just very, very basic, very simple. Nothing too fancy. So here's the practice assignment. I would like you to write the pseudocode, write the code, and then test the code. And seeing as I'm not with you today, I'm going to give you the pseudocode right away. Here it is right here. Determine the random number using that random number generator that I just showed you. Get the user guess. That's going to be using an input. Check to see if it's correct. You're going to use an if there for that. And in your if, you're going to have a then. If the number is correct, then yes, and you are correct. Else, you are wrong. And print the wrong statement. Here are the statements here. No, too bad. The correct number is 7. Yes, you are right. And if you don't get those exact, that's no big deal. It's just practice. Okay, so using this pseudocode right here, I'm going to ask that you pause the video. See if you can write that code. And in about 5-7 minutes, the sub can press play again, and I'll show you the answer. Go ahead and press pause. All right. Hopefully you've had a chance to give this a whirl. I'm going to show you how I built the program here in Liberty Basic. First thing we're going to do is get that random number, and I just cut and paste right from my notes. See if we can make this a little bit bigger for you. All right, there is a little bit bigger. So random number equals int of RND of 1 times 10 plus 1. Next step, my pseudocode says get user guess, so I'm going to use an input. I'm going to say, what is your guess? We're going to call that guess. Then I check to see if I'm correct using an if. So if guess equals random number and print yes. That is correct. And if it's not equal, then the else part, then I print sorry, no. That is not correct. And remember, you must end your if. And you should end the program with an end as well. Okay, let's just check that, run it, see if it works. And I've got some sort of syntax error here. Oh, I've got an unfinished string. Looks like I forgot to close my quotations there, so we'll fix that. That's better. What's my guess? 5. Oh, I typed 45. Sorry, no, that's not correct. How am I going to know that if the if part works, if it works actually correct? Well, a little trick here of programmers is when you're doing something like this, is to actually give the number, something like this, print random number, just throw that in there as a test. So now I know the answer is 3, and yes, my true part actually works. And now if I'm going to actually run that program properly, I would delete that. That's just in there as a test. Okay, so I'll leave that up there for a second or so. If you want to pause, jot that down, type it in, save it, your choice. Okay, so I'm going to move on here. Now, normally what I would do, I think, is I would talk about the project part. I'm going to save that for tomorrow until I return. So let's skip the project part. I'm sure you'll be thrilled with that. Here's the actual hand-in assignment. Mr. Bennett wants a program to determine if a student receives honors. Honors is defined as an overall average of greater than or equal to 85. So if it's equal to 85 or bigger, you get honors. Your program will allow him to enter 4 marks, so you're going to need 4 inputs, calculate the average, and then determine if the student receives honors. How do you find the average? You add them all up and divide by 4. I will remind you that if you're going to add 4 things up, you're going to go 3 plus, well, let's do marks. Let's go 67 plus 89 plus 86 plus 76 divided by 4. That will not give you the average. Remember that you need to put brackets around that. You need to make sure that the adding part is done before you divide by 4 if you want the correct answer. So just a quick reminder. Okay? Here's the sample run, what it should look like. Enter first mark, 45. Enter second mark, 67, and so on. 4 different inputs. Then a print. This student's average is 74.5. This student does not get honors because the mark is not greater than 85. And this would also be a print. Okay, so you've got 4 inputs. And you've got down here 2 prints. Okay, here's another sample run. This time, because the mark is over 85, it says the student does get honors. Okay, so that's the if part. I'd like you to write the pseudocode, write the code, and test it. Make sure it works. That is all for today. The assignment is on Schoology as well if you need to see it on there. And if you need to print it, you can do so as well. So I hope you have a good day, and I'm hoping I'll be back tomorrow.